Baker et al. Also did a systematic review of these kind of apps, and they, quote, identified only 5 apps that had supporting evidence from randomized controlled trials. A search of the Apple and Google App Stores as of January 2014 reveals that none of these supported apps is currently available to consumers, unquote. Additionally, it's important to note that a lot of the designers of these apps have little background or educational training in the medical or mental health field, and app stores don't really have any guidelines or restrictions on what products make it onto the market. So this is concerning in itself. Even Jessica Shelton, the person who writes for Psych.com, she was really positive on her website about, and enthusiastic on her website about mental health apps. She advocated really strongly for them, for their use in the industry. But even she admitted in the middle of the website that, quote, the vast majority of these apps do not have peer-reviewed research to support their claim, unquote. Personally, I think this is a really, really big deal. An industry without regulation and without standards seems like an industry doomed to fail. And I don't think this is acceptable or safe when someone's health is on the line. But that is a personal opinion, so I will leave that there. Another downside to these apps is that they often require users to be intrinsically motivated. By that, I mean they have to be willing to use the apps on their own time without a medical provider constantly reminding them to do so. In a similar vein, a few studies have found that the messaging surrounding this type of self-care and intrinsic self-treatment is problematic. For instance, a study conducted in 2018 by Parker et al. Analyzed many of the most popular mental health apps currently on the market. And they, quote, identified 2 dominant messages about mental health. 1, poor or fragile mental health is ubiquitous, and 2, individuals can easily manage their own mental health problems with apps. These messages promote the idea that individuals should take personal responsibility for their own health, and that self-monitoring and therapy are a moral imperative that we should all be undertaking ourselves, unquote. This idea of taking personal responsibility for one's own health reminded me distinctly of the Donna Haraway article we read, in which she talked about, quote, human bodies now interact with medical technologies in a variety of ways, and they are employed in telemedical systems as part of self-care and self-monitoring regimes for people with chronic medical conditions, as well as taken up voluntarily by individuals keen to track their biometric data in the interest of promoting their health. And of course, she kind of connects this to the idea of the digitally engaged patient. But I thought this was a interesting kind of connection between the two articles. This leads nicely to the 4th drawback to mental health apps, namely that they may convince users not to seek out professional help from providers because people might just assume that the apps themselves are enough for treatment. I imagine this would especially be the case for people who are already at risk of not receiving any treatment at all. Again, those people who come from minority backgrounds or who are in financial troubles. And even though a mental health app might be better than no treatment at all, almost every study on this subject has shown that an app is a really poor substitute for professional face-to-face treatment with a certified psychologist or psychiatrist. So this is especially true actually for people with severe mental illnesses. The Firth et al. Article I mentioned earlier on depression, they found that the apps were better suited for, quote, delivering low-intensity treatment for people affected by subclinical symptoms, but less effective, in some cases not effective at all, for more severe symptoms of depression. So again, it's you need an app. That app does not substitute for actual treatment. You need real treatment. The 5th drawback is the possibility of overdiagnosis and users feeling shame or experiencing stigma. Parker et al. Explained that one of the dangers of mental health apps is that they might, quote, diagnose mild or temporary symptoms as illness where that diagnosis brings no patient benefit, and that this can lead to unnecessary treatment and divert resources from those who really need help, unquote. Baker et al. Corroborate this assertion, writing that, quote, many available mental health apps target specific disorders and label their users with a diagnosis, even when symptoms are minimal. Much research has suggested that this labeling process can be harmful and stigmatizing, unquote. Of course, if someone is constantly checking the app and using it and receiving feedback about their symptoms, there's also the possibility that this could make the symptoms worse by fixating on them. And I think this idea reminds me of the Deborah Lupton article from a few weeks ago, which she talked about, quote, fitness devices are represented as providing ways for people to overcome their body ills, current or potential, by giving them the capacity to gain self-knowledge of their bodies via the data produced, making users constantly aware of the fleshy nature of their bodies, how high their blood pressure or glucose levels are, how happy they feel, how many steps they have walked a day, etc. Creating a self-reflexive hyper-awareness of the body and its weaknesses and frailties, unquote. Connect this idea back to mental health apps. There's a fear that the same hypersensitivity could develop for users when they interact with these apps, and so instead of being constantly aware of the fleshy nature of one's body, you could become constantly aware of the cerebral nature of one's brain. How high are my depression symptoms today? What's my anxiety level, etc. Finally, the last drawback is perhaps the most obvious and pragmatic on the list. Namely, there's always a risk of a user's privacy being breached. Sure, most of the apps are fairly secure and private at this point, but anytime you put your personal health information on a digital device, you're still taking the risk that your data might be hacked or stolen someday. So that's important to keep in mind. So before I offer my closing remarks for section 1, I want to provide a quick example of a new app that doesn't really fall victim to the aforementioned drawbacks. During the course of my research, I found an article published by MIT Technology Review entitled "The Smartphone App That I Can Tell When You Are Depressed Before You Can." It discussed a new app called MindStrong, and I really like the sound of this thing because it kind of overcomes several of the key issues we've already identified with mental health apps. For instance, the article mentions that, quote, once a patient installs MindStrong's app, it monitors things like the way a person types, taps, and scrolls while using other apps. This data is encrypted and analyzed remotely using machine learning, and the results are shared with the patient and the patient's medical provider. With details gleaned from the app, MindStrong will tell a patient's doctor or other care manager via an alert system when something may be amiss, and they can check in with the patient by sending a message to the app, unquote. I think this all sounds great because it reduces the reliance on, for one, intrinsic motivation, because users don't have to repeatedly or even regularly engage with the app on purpose. Likewise, you don't have to fear overdiagnosis too much because the data is being sent straight to a medical provider to look through. And this also eliminates the concerns about problematic messaging regarding self-care, because again, the medical professional is the one who is dealing with the treatment and the assistance. They're telling you that you do need professional treatment, not self-care. I also like the MIT article even addresses the issue of whether we can trust the app is effective and does what it claims to do, because it asks explicitly, why should anyone believe that what MindStrong is doing can actually work? Well, thousands of people are using the app, and the company now has 5 years of clinical study data to confirm its science and technology. It is continuing to perform numerous studies, and this past March, it began working with patients and doctors in clinics, unquote. So this is an app that I think is a great idea. You can see I provided on this screen a print screen of the homepage for MindStrong, and if you're interested, I encourage you to check it out. So to conclude this literature review, I'll provide you with what I would have made my thesis if this was a written paper then instead of a presentation, and this will probably end up being my thesis for my final research paper. But basically, you have general consensus is again that these apps can do a lot of good for the mental health community, but at the moment, any professional should use caution before recommending them because there's not a lot of data on them right now. So yeah, they need to be careful before they do it. All right, so let's go to step 2 here, section 2, I mean, and talk about my research process. So when I was conducting my topic brainstorming for my digital story, I made sure to kind of show my process. As you can see, I took a print screen of my topic brainstorming. I put like step 1, make a list of potential topics. That's exactly what I did. I ended up having 4 potential topics initially, and I narrowed it down to this one because I felt like there was the most data that I could talk about. Plus, I thought it was the most interesting of the topics. And here's the other part. Step 2 was choose one topic to focus on exclusively, which I did. I chose this topic, and then the third step was I summarized and outlined the information that I found on my chosen topic, which was very helpful for this assignment, and I'm sure will be very helpful for the final research paper. So that was kind of my process that I took. And then, of course, I also made the resource catalog, which was essentially my works cited page, which you'll see fairly soon. For my most and least informative sources, the most informative source I would have to say would be, excuse me, the Firth et al. Paper, because it provided me with a number of interesting sources about how access to mental health care remains limited. The least informative source I thought would be the Torres et al. One. Not so much that it was informative, I guess, but more so that it used a lot of technical jargon, and it wasn't confusing, but it was really dense. And when you're trying to summarize an article like that, it can be difficult because there was a lot of data to kind of sort through. So those were my most and least informative sources. And then here's my outline for the final research paper. I'm not going to go through it because there's really no need to. It's essentially what I have done in the presentation itself. I kind of essentially walked through what I'm going to be writing about for my final research paper, but you can see kind of how it's broken down here. So thank you everyone for watching this presentation. I had a lot of fun researching this topic and learning more about the industry. I hope that more and more designers will take after the creators of Mindstrong. It sounds as if that is a product that I would really like and benefit from as someone with an anxiety disorder. If I had more time on this assignment, I would have loved to look at more specific examples of these apps, like really popular choices, like for instance, Headspace and Moodpath. Yeah, I think I would have just loved to dive more deep into the thousands upon thousands of these kind of apps. Okay, last but not least, here's my works cited page. Professor Hodges encouraged us to try to have a healthy mix of scholarly peer-reviewed sources and primary sources slash informal ones. So that's exactly what I tried to do here. You'll see that about, I think, I don't know, 3/4 are scholarly peer review, maybe a little less than that, and the rest are other types of sources. But you can look at that more closely if you'd like. I hope everyone has a great rest of the week, and thank you.